am compelled by schlock. I am compelled by schlock. I am compelled by
Schlock isn't a costume. Schlock is a lifestyle. What is up, everybody? We are talking about Return of the Living Dead. I am Darby Ellis Lewis Wilson. This is Chris Anonymous, and we are going to break this movie down by the good, the bad, and the schlock to see what makes it tick. Chris, you picked this movie. Are you a big zombie fan?
I'm a big zombie fan. I am. And I felt that this was, I was lacking in this piece of zombie knowledge because I've seen so many zombie films that I know that this is a touchstone in zombie cinema. And I hate to admit it, but until Saturday, I had never seen this movie.
Oh, wow. Yeah, this is the movie. I feel like it might be more famous culturally than Night of the Living Dead. Night of the Living Dead started all of it.
It might be.
But this is where we get the classic idea. Brains, yes. So this movie, it came out in 1985. I can't do math. Night of the Living Dead came out in 1968. So however many years, that's a little under 20 years later. So it really sort of picks up in a way where it left off. We'll get into that a little bit more later. It cost about $4 million to make, and it made over $14 million. So very successful film. It is definitely a cult classic. Roger Ebert gave it 3 out of 4 stars, which is kind of unprecedented for him because he hates scary movies. I don't know what his deal is, but for some reason he semi-loved Return of the Living Dead. So this movie is so popular that a lot has already been said about it. There's DVD commentaries, there's tell-all books, there's conventions, there's just all sorts of things related to this movie. People have made entire careers off of this movie. So I don't think that I'm really going to add a whole lot by giving you nuggets. There are great things to learn about this movie. If you want to find something funny, go check out what all of the different titles of the movie was in different languages. They're pretty hilarious. So why don't we start jumping into what we do? What we do is we break these movies down between talking about what's good about them, what's bad about them, and what's schlocky about them. Schlock, that's kind of our catch-all. It's like, what are the weird things going on in these movies, whether it's technically or story-wise, or where did they whiff it? Where did they really nail it? What are some of the big ideas in it?
Right.
But we also... Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, before we dive too in, you talking about schlock reminded me that we should warn people that we're going to ruin everything. We're going to spoil every movie, and that we are schlocky ourselves, and we have some special schlock coming up. Do we not?
Ooh, yes, that is right. I'll give you a little bit of a spoiler for the end of our show tonight. We have some big news, and I'm very excited to share with you, but you got to stick around to the end because it's going to be awesome. Trust me, stick around. So before we get into all of this, we like to talk about the web of schlock. We like to talk about discover who's involved in these movies. Have we seen them before on this show? So Chris, hit me up with what you got.
We could deep dive into all these actors. A lot of them are in the whole schlock universe, and and the people behind the scenes. And again, like you said, there's not a lot that hasn't been touched on. So I'm just gonna pick a couple, and we'll talk about them. And if you want to have more, then do the deep dive yourself. But let's start with two actors. The woman who played Trash, Linnea Quigley. We have seen her on this show before. She was Denise in Silent Night, Deadly Night.
Nice.
Yeah. She was also in Graduation Day. She was also in Night of the Demons. So just
oh wow.
Yeah, just total schlock royalty.
So Scream Queen for sure.
Scream Queen for sure. And then I'd like to mention Freddie, played by Tom Matthews. So he played Freddie in this movie. In the sequel, he plays a character named Joey, but it's what he did in between these two movies that I want to talk about. He played a little character named Tommy Jarvis in Friday the 13th, Part 6.
That's right.
And he's still playing Tommy Jarvis in a lot of spin-offs and video games and like straight to video things. So another bit of schlock royalty. Just a very cool little side note there. I was looking through some of the special effects and people involved in that, and an uncredited sculptor for this movie was a guy by the name of Adam Jones.
Oh wow!
Which you might know from his work in Jurassic Park, or as the guitarist for Tool.
Yeah.
So just fun little things like that you're like, wow. And then
that's cool. What a career!
And then the writer director, who has been on this show twice. Well, he hasn't, but we've talked about him on the show twice. Dan O'Bannon, Dark Star, and then Dead and Buried. Which I loved both, some to different degrees, but they're very much like this movie. There's something to talk about. Now, this he also directed as opposed to just writing, and he had a short film before this, and then he only directed one other film afterwards. So he has lots of writing credits around this time, but like directing wise, not a whole lot.
Do you know what it was after this?
It was like The Resurrection. Oh man, give me two seconds.
Was it a horror film?
I never saw it. From what it looks like, it was at least horror adjacent.
Well, either way, we might have to get into it just so we have we've done the complete Dan O'Bannon collection.
The Resurrected in 1991.
Okay.
Yeah.
Add it to the list, people.
Right. I mean, but writing wise, Dark Star, Alien, Dead and Buried, the original story for the cartoon Heavy Metal, Blue Thunder, Life Force, Invaders from Mars, Total Recall. I mean,
yeah. Wow.
Yeah. He's just
and the man O'Bannon.
Yeah. Yeah. He was a cool dude. Favorites. Cool dude. In everything I've seen of him, there's something very watchable and very smart. The other interesting thing is, and we can use this to dovetail into the next segment, is Rudy Ritchie, I believe, or Rudy. John A. Russo. They have a credit for Night of the Living Dead, and they have story credit for this. So there was a book that they had written that was a sequel. And originally, this was supposed to be a lot more in line with Night of the Living Dead and a more serious take. And Dan O'Bannon's like, nope, I don't want to step on Romero's toes. And he pretty much rewrote it and made it into this horror comedy that it is.
Which is really, really its own thing.
It's its own thing. And so much so that Night of the Living Dead is a movie within this world. Which is really cool. So that brings us to you found a chart, right?
Yeah. So God bless the internet. I found this awesome zombie movie chart or Living Dead chart or Night of Dead. I don't know what you'd want to call it, but it shows sort of the influence of Night of the Living Dead. You can see it there in the semi-center of the chart, and it shows all of these arrows coming out from it. These are all of the movies that sort of branched off from this one movie. And I think it's pretty amazing. The only movie we've watched on here now is Return of the Living Dead. So I would really like...
You and I have probably seen well over half of these on our own, but the show, just the one.
Yeah, some of these are great. If we get over into the Dawn of the Dead area, we see that was recut into a film called Zombie Overseas, and then it went into Zombie 2, which is one of my favorites, because I love Italian zombie movies. I feel like they have the best zombie makeup effects. But man, I am a huge zombie fan, and I would really like to explore through all of these movies. So we're going to keep a hold of this chart. If you made this chart and you're cranky that we're using it, tell us and we'll give you credit, or we'll quit using it and make our own. So, or speak now or forever hold your peace. But we are going to work our way through these movies as we can, as they come, and sort of see this weird world of direct sequels and remakes and remake sequels and side sequels. I think it's a fascinating route to go down. And just to reiterate, yeah, we had basically Romero and Russo on Night of the Living Dead, which sort of started the whole this modern idea of zombies, like in their current form. And then Romero split off and did Of the Dead, like the kind of the Of the Dead series, Day of the Dead, Dawn of the Dead, Land of the Dead. And Russo split off and took the Living Dead part of the title and did Return of the Living Dead, Return of the Living Dead Part 2. And it went off on into that direction. So that's where the split is. So we are like in Part 2 of a series that we haven't technically started with Part 1 yet, but we will get there. We're going to do Night of the Living Dead as a special sometime. So anyway, should we move on to good and bad?
Let's knock it out.
Well, let me fire through them real quick, because as far as good and bad go, I don't know if I have a whole lot to say, because spoiler, we're good. I pretty much like everything about this movie. It is firing on all cylinders. I think they really hit it with the humor. So we see right at the beginning of the movie, they establish their humor really well. Because first we have the based on real events title card. And right, if you don't know what you're getting into when you're starting this movie, a lot of horror movies, that's a big trope to say, inspired by true events, or this really happened, or whatever. It's like a Texas Chainsaw Massacre, right?
Most exorcism movies.
Yeah, so you think like, oh, this might be a very serious thing, and then the very next shot really establishes the humor of it, where they have the shot of the medical store. What's it called? Unita.
Mm-hmm.
Like you need it, we got it. Like it's just this really weird tongue in cheek. Yeah, you need it, we got it. Medical supply, none larger. And so they immediately go into like based on true events into we have puns. We are a punny movie. And then from there we go into Frank and Freddie. And for me, these guys are the movie. Like I just want to watch these guys panicking. I would watch that for 2 hours straight. These guys are the absolute highlight for me. The next thing I mentioned earlier, zombie makeup. So normally, like I said, Italian zombie movies have my favorite makeup in them. I don't know how to pronounce the director's name, but Lucio Fulci. He did a lot of zombie stuff. Has great makeup where like worms are like crawling out of faces and stuff. And if you compare that to George Romero's zombies suck. They're just people that are like painted blue. But here, Return of the Living Dead, we get like this nice blend between like kind of an Americanized sort of zombie style and a European style zombie, where we get people that they just look like they're pale, but we also get people.
These are continental zombies.
Yeah. We get this bone skeleton guy, which I think is interesting here. I took this picture because if you've ever seen any of the Evil Dead promotional pictures, they have this skull with eyeballs in it. but you
Mhm.
never see that skull with eyeballs in it. I think in any of the movies, but you do see it here in Return of the Living Dead. So I can't help but wonder if that was some influence. But
This
we have,
almost became like a shorthand, a visual shorthand for just horror movies. And
Ex-
yeah,
well, like what a good shot! Like the eyeballs in the skull. I love that. And we also have another iconic character, the Tar Man. It's the guy that comes out of the Easter eggs, the ooze vats or whatever. What a great animatronic puppet costume. He's the one that popularized Brains. Apparently, in the movie, they call him the Tar Baby, which I think collectively they've decided outside of the movie that they probably shouldn't say that because it's slightly racist. So making him a man, I guess, makes it more consensual that he's called that. But what a great character. I just love the way he moves. He is all business, very terrifying zombie. What else do
there's
I have?
also something very lovable about him.
Yeah, right. You kind of want to
Hug him.
be like, what's up, man?
Yeah, if I had to hug a zombie, that's the zombie I'd hug.
Yeah. So bad. I mean, I don't really have a whole lot of bad about this movie. I mean, you can maybe argue that the pacing is a little odd. For me, I always combine Return of the Living Dead and Return of the Living Dead Part 2 into one movie because they are sort of paced similarly, and it feels like one takes off. This isn't true, but it feels like one takes off where the other leaves off. And you said
Like
in
a
the
Halloween 2 sort of thing.
yeah, but you said in the Web of Schlock that Joey is it like it's the same actor?
Yep.
So maybe that's very confusing for a pea brain like me. So I just like make them one movie in my mind. So maybe that's bad. There are probably technical or like continuity things that you could pick apart in it. I've said before that, I don't really care for nudity in movies, and this is very nudity heavy, but interesting enough, like some of it's prosthetic so that they wouldn't get an X rating, but like it's the prosthetic of the lower regions, but like it's still there. So I don't, apparently you can have facsimiles and not get an X rating. But anyway, that's all I have for good and bad. Chris, what do you have?
Well, just fun. Funny. I loved everything about this movie. I loved the music. I loved the location. I loved the characters. We have a picture of the cool kids. This is like the punk version of the Breakfast Club, and I love this. This does so much in setting up who they are with just the different tropes and the different styles, and yet they're all friends and hanging out, right? Like this looks like 5 kids in school in the 90s or 80s who would never hang out with each other, yet they're all really close friends, but they also can poke at each other, and it's just it just sets a tone that makes you fall in love with this movie. Like I just love it.
And they're not showing him, but Suicide, the guy with the chain,
he's amazing.
And apparently they're just hanging out with him. They're just hanging out with him because he has a car.
Yeah, you're just hanging out with me because I have a car. But also, like, it's so strange that it all just works. I love the zombies in it. I'm trying to think what else. Oh, I love the shots of the zombies and all the different kinds. Like we have a picture of the Living Dead. There's so many just sight gags, and it should take you out of the movie, but it pulls you into the movie. It's just crazy.
And here you really see the difference in the makeup, right? These are just dirty people. Yeah,
they're dirty people, but also like, how old are they and why are they in these Victorian dresses? And like, it's just, there's something also, there's something like inherently funny about this and extremely creepy at the same time.
Yeah.
And they don't cancel each other out. They should, but they don't. It's amazing. The music is one of my favorite things. I love the music in this. The one of the main songs is by a band called SSQ, which turned into Stacy Q, who had the hit in the 80s, Two of Hearts. But in this, it's a very synth pop, and Trash is dancing to it, and it's just they bring the song back. I love all of it. So bad. I don't have any bad.
Perfect movie.
So here's I was racking my brain for like bad, and I'm like, okay, I have general bads of there's some strange pacing issues and tonal issues, and there's no protagonist, and there's not really any hope, which I've complained about horror movies in general with a lack of hope, how they become just too nihilistic for me, and I don't enjoy them as much as horror with hope, even if the hope is dashed at the end. But guess what? In this movie, somehow they took those things that are usually problems, and they totally work in this movie. And I don't quite know why. I think it's like alchemy. I think they just had the perfect little recipe. And maybe I'm just on a high of seeing it for the first time and just having my schlocky mind blown. But
have you seen the original The Crazies?
Yes.
It has a very The Crazies feel to it, which is interesting because it's Romero, but that's sort of like the government's just gonna blow you up in the end sort of vibe.
Yeah. So let's get into schlock, man.
Yeah, let's do it. So yeah, you already brought up the ending, the tragic ending. Why does it work? Like I feel like that's a huge question. We get is it Frank that has the suicide? He decides that he is going to not turn into brain-eating zombies, so he decides to put himself in the cremator,
which is brilliant. That's one of my favorite scenes. Evidently, it was his idea because he didn't want to be a zombie in the rain and be all cold and stand up there in the middle of the night. Right?
Yeah, he takes his ring off. Right? He says early in the movie that, I need to call my wife. No, you don't have time for that. He takes his ring off and puts it on the switch, like it's pretty beautiful, and it's very tragic.
Yeah. But, and then he just says a prayer and asks for forgiveness, and then he crawls in the incinerator and presses the start button, man.
Which I think is a very interesting decision, because they figured out that you can't die, if you have this. It's not really a virus; it's some sort of reanimating chemical,
right?
But if you have this, you can't die even if you're dismembered. And so that makes me wonder, does burn, if you turn to ash, is the ash still sentient? I have a picture, the Death is Pain torso zombie, the half rotted corpse they pull in from the window, and they tie her down and they start talking to her. And
I've never seen that. I mean, there's so many touchstones in this that just are that's really interesting to see in a zombie movie.
Well, they're talking zombies, which I think is really interesting. I think that they're doing some gags here, and maybe they missed the mark, or maybe they did exactly what they wanted to, but there's something going on here that I think is really deep, that implies a larger world around it. I don't know why it gives me some Hellraiser vibes, that maybe the afterlife isn't exactly what we think it is, and it's some sort of other dimension. Because you'll notice that when she's talking, and you'll see this definitely in part 2, but she doesn't have any lips, right? And she's saying death is pain, very articulated. She's not going, "This is pain," right? She can.
They should have done that and subtitled it,
right? But so to me, it seems is there some sort of spiritual element here? Right. It's more of a ghost speaking.
Yeah. It's like a ghost tethered to a rotting body. And so they're feeling the pain of that.
So the really hungry ghost.
Yeah,
right? That idea.
it could be a hungry ghost kind of trope. It's really interesting how like pathetic that scene is. Like there's just so much pathos in it, and it turns really dark and really serious, and you feel bad for it. Like it needs something to take away the pain, and that happens to be brains, right? But then you have like the other talking zombies, and they're like, send more cops,
Paramedics,
send more
cops.
paramedics. And then you have the cop zombie who's like telling him to stop with this
Waving them in.
little oh man, I had to pause. I was just laughing out loud. I rewound that like 3 times. It just that scene got me. I'm like, again,
they're intelligent.
Yeah, they're intelligent, but they're also there's a tongue-in-cheekness too that is just it reminds me of like Evil Dead 2, where like there's a level of like humor that is borderline slapstick, but for some reason it just works. It just
plays
works
really well. Yeah. So with trying to sort of figure out like what these zombies are and how they work, right? How are they intelligent without brains? Again, that implies some sort of ghost spiritual thing going on, right? Their essence is still alive or something. But we also have the mutant trash zombie, right? She gets her death wish. She's torn apart by old men. But then when she comes back as a zombie, she looks like a vampire or something.
Yeah. Like it was such a cool vibe and freaky with that red hair and like her kind of slow motion, sultry walk toward the camera. And like this creature is going to tear you limb from limb. But like you could have her be the villain of an entire movie.
Right. And that's I think it's like, again, that's why it feels like the pacing is weird, because once she is in it that way, it seems like she should be the driving antagonistic force.
And again, right?
She wants everyone to join her in death or something. Right.
Yeah. I mean, it's so interesting.
But the question is, why is she this mutant zombie, whereas the other ones aren't? Like I got, kind of some Resident Evil vibes, where the virus mutates and makes them more dangerous. But again, it's not a virus. So I don't know. I think probably it's in there because they're like, this will be cool. And that's
100%. And you know what? They're right. They're right.
It works.
Yeah. So another thing that would probably annoy me beyond anything in another film is there's so much screaming in this movie. It's like nonstop screaming. Like you talked about the two guys in the beginning. Once the zombies are out there, they're just running around screaming, which is so realistic of like what would happen. Like they're just chickens with their heads cut off, man. They're just back and forth and just nonstop really screaming, like ah! And like it should annoy me, but
it's hilarious.
It's hilarious. I love it. Like this movie shouldn't work as well as it does, and it does. I'll tell you the part that got me like 100%, like pretty much from the get-go with that, based on true events. I was like, it was nudging me into like full on like Uber fan. But it's when they incinerate the rabid weasels, the body parts, and like you're like, okay, they got that done. And then it cuts to outside and you see the creepy colored smoke out there. And then the rainstorm starts, and it's so stylized and so cool, but it's also such a smart, like storytelling device of like, again, there might not be a protagonist, but the collective protagonist, they're working to solve a problem and they're making it worse. If they hadn't incinerated the body, if they just taken it and put it back in some barrels, right, this movie wouldn't have happened. But they're like, again, we've talked about like with hubris and like that need to save yourself. And so he's trying to save his business, his freedom, everything. So instead of just burying it, he burns it, but that causes the chemicals to rain out over the whole cemetery and raises the dead.
It's kind of like, I think a trope in zombie movies, right, is that humans are the real monsters. And so zombies are generally created out of hubris or out of man playing God or something.
Right.
But really, the zombies are created in this through a series of incompetence.
Yeah.
Right? Like this is made by the Corps of Army Engineers. And all the smoke comes out.
Yep. Yeah.
And yeah, they're just doing the wrong thing. They're not trying to really outsmart anyone per se. They're not trying to play God.
I mean, it makes sense to burn it. It makes total sense to do that, right? But also at the same time, you see that, and then you double down at the end because we have that shot where they nuke that 4-mile radius, right? And then but the fires are put out by the rain. And people are talking about how the rain's making their skin burn, but it'll be fine. So
that's always good.
Yeah, so it's this perpetual thing. Like it'll never end. Like the zombies will rule the world.
Yeah, which is really interesting that part 2 doesn't take off from there, because that sets up a sequel. But I believe part 2, they find another canister somewhere. That's what sets off.
That's what I read in the description.
Is really odd. But we are getting close to the end. I want to kind of circle back around to this because you bring up a really interesting point that there's no protagonist in this, or traditionally, like what we would traditionally think of.
There's lots of characters.
It's more of an ensemble zombie movie, and so I guess the question is, in order to tell a good story, do you have to have a protagonist?
I think in general you do, but I think this movie shows that not necessarily. I think you don't necessarily need a protagonist to have a compelling movie. And you could argue that different characters take up the mantle of a protagonist, like it's passing the baton.
Oh yeah, that's a good way to put it.
But there's, in the traditional sense, I don't find a single protagonist here.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that is a great way to put it. They pass their baton because they do set up arcs for these people, and we see the arcs play out. But they're kind of front loaded, right? They introduce a character and front load their character arc with like, here's who they are, right? They're pretty much just like one-dimensional characters in a way. So they just have very simple wants and needs, right? Frank just wants to get home to his wife. And so they talk about that for a bit, and then we see him put his ring on at the end, and that's all we need to complete his character arc. So we have time for other characters. Right.
Yeah, everyone has their little moment to shine, whether it's driving your car and just looking cool, or having a conversation with a girl you like, or dancing on a grave thing, or I mean, there's just
she completes her arc. She gets what she wants. The mod and the party girl, they don't like each other, but they come together at the end, right? So anyway, we are running out of time. I think that we could just talk about this movie forever, but next week we have a very special episode for you guys. We are having the world's foremost Rockulite, the leader curator of the Rockula fan club, S. Michael Sims. He is going to come on the show with us and talk about Rockula. So we are going to watch it again. We're going to do our Rockula rewind. It's still on Tubi. You can also find it on YouTube. So make sure you watch it. Come back here, and we are going to find out all of the great nuggets about this movie and what makes it unique, what makes it great. Chris, anything else?
That's it, man.
All right.
See you next week.
I'm Darby Ellis. This is Chris Anonymous, and we will see you in the Rockula Rewind special. Bye, guys.
I am